My name is Karen Golden Oronte. I'm here today with a special edition of Living Histories. Today we are presenting the 1939 movie Queen that was filmed here in Cohasset. We have some special guests, Bill Liscombe, Betty Marie, and Don Kennedy. Bill's mom was the Bettina Bancroft, who was the movie queen, the star. And we have Betty Marie, whose great-grandfather was a settler here in Cohasset, and Don Kennedy, whose grandfather came here in Cohasset, all of which have ties to the movie queen. So I would like to introduce our first guest, Bill Liscombe. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Hi, Karen.
Could you please tell us how you came about finding out about the movie queen?
Well, I'd heard my mom talk about it over all my life. And just last winter, I was getting my wife's car serviced. And I walked downtown and had breakfast. And while I was sitting there, I was trying to remember if the music store had been where the restaurant is on 5 South Main. And I couldn't really remember. So I stopped at the Historical Society on the way back to see if they had a phone book from 1965. They didn't have one, and I asked them what kind of programs they have and what kind of exhibits they had coming up, and they said, well, you won't believe, they said, well, we're having one this spring on a movie that was shot here in 1939 called The Movie Queen. And my mouth kind of fell open, and I said, that's my mom. And their mouth kind of fell open and said, don't leave. So we did a little presentation on that down there.
Excellent. So now, Betty, what is your recollection of the movie Queen when it was being filmed in 1939?
Well, I was 11, but I remember going as a family. We were all there, and my a lot of uncles and my grandfather and everything. So I did get to see it, the whole thing. It was really interesting. And later on, I babysat for Bettina, so I got to know her really well after that. Yeah, it was good.
That's fun too.
Yeah.
And Don, what is your recollection?
I was 7 years old, and my grandfather got here in 1880. And my father was in the play that they did to abduct the movie queen the following morning after she got here. And so I recognized a lot of the people, the places, and the things that were going on that given day.
So, Bill, if you could tell us a bit about Bettina.
Well, her grandfather was in Harrigan and Hart, the vaudeville acting troupe in New York City, and had a son. And unfortunately, the son was orphaned at 13, and he had no interest in acting and instead started making lamps for carriages. When he saved up enough money, he started his own company making really high quality lanterns out of brass. And 100 years ago, he was an automotive industrialist. They made starters, headlamps, generators, all kinds of electrical accessories for cars. And Bettina was the oldest of 3 children. So because of that car connection, today they'd all be called gearheads. They all had a big interest in cars. And Bettina became interested in acting and studied at the Erskine School here in Boston. She went to Austria, studied over there, and then went to New York. And I don't know what groups she was part of down there, but she met Elia Kazan and Thornton Wilder here in this picture, who apparently at one time came up to Cohasset for their Our Town play, and he was either in it or watched it, and then gave Bettina this picture. So she had a lot to do with the dramatic club here in Cohasset in the 30s and 40s, and actually on up into the 50s. And what's really interesting is all her friends that I met when I was growing up, it turns out a lot of them were her acting friends from the 30s and 40s and 50s.
So, Betty, during the filming of the movie, they asked the townspeople to congregate at different locations? Because there's a lot of photographs at the town hall, at the different at every church in town, and the Girl Scouts and.
Yeah, I think they got groups together and, you know, went from one to the other. I can't remember too much about that, but we were all grouped and ready to be filmed, yeah.
And Don, what is your, you were in the movie as well?
No, I don't see myself in any of the shots that I've shown before. But what they did was they went around to the Catholic Church and the Unitarian Church and the Congregational churches, and they filmed the people the following Sunday morning. This was Friday afternoon that she first got to town. And throughout the weekend, they had all these events planned that people were all standing around in crowds. And then the cameras would pan around through the crowd, so that's how you happen to see all of the people's faces that only a few of us know who they are anymore.
Right.
Our mothers and fathers and next door neighbors. And the more times I see this film, the more people I start to recognize. For instance, there was a little old lady standing in the background, and her name was Miss Wing, and she taught the 3rd grade. The first time I saw the movie, I did not recognize it, but the 3rd time I saw the movie, I spotted her immediately. The same with old Mr. Stone, the man with the pockmarked nose.
Oh, yeah.
So, the big question, did you know who the dog was in the beginning when the Queen arrived to town? Did you remember the big, it was
A Great Dane.
Great Dane,
Yeah.
fabulous Great Dane. It was really quite spectacular, but no one seems to know who the Great Dane was. So, did Bettina talk at all about her movie queen or her vision, her being photographed from movie queen? How that
Yeah,
all
she
came
talked
about?
about it, but you know, being a kid and it being my mom, I didn't listen to a lot of it. I wished I had now,
Yeah.
you know, but she obviously, you know, is a very creative person, and after doing that and having me, and she started doing paintings. We moved from here in about 1955 or 6. We moved to Florida for about 7 years. And down there she started painting. She did address signs for people's houses. And she put clear varnish on them, and you know, there'd be flowers and the street number and perhaps their name. She did a lot of those down there. She continued with her painting as we moved up to upstate New York for a couple of years. We came back here in 1965, and I moved to California in 1968, and in 1971 I started hang gliding. I'm one of the pioneers of the sport of hang gliding. And in about that time, my mom got a camera and started taking pictures, and she started going to hang glider events, and within a couple of years she was one of the more famous hang gliding photographers in the world. And I guess a really conservative estimate would be she took somewhere between 30 and 50,000 pictures.
Oh my gosh.
And you know, hang glider pilots around the world considered her their mom. And this picture you're holding up is really interesting. The picture on the right is of me flying off of Little Black Mountain in San Diego in 1974. And the first time I saw this picture, it was on display at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. So, you know, we have the mounted picture back in the family archives. So that was her passion for the final chapters of her life. And she used her maiden name of Gray, and a lot of people in hang gliding didn't realize that she was my mom. So we'd have fun with that too. She was pretty spunky and had a good sense of humor.
So is this when she was a photographer? Was this picture?
Yeah, this appears to be a picture taken over in Great Britain at one of the hang gliding events over there. She traveled all over the world, Japan, Canada, United States, all through Great Britain, photographing competitions.
And then here we have a picture of her. What year do you think this is?
Oh boy, that's probably in the 1980s.
So now, the movie, are we going to play the movie today?
Yeah.
We should take a look at the movie, because there are people who are familiar with Cohasset, maybe in in the last couple of decades or so, will see a lot of we'll see some familiar sites like all the churches, but then they'll see a lot of retail locations that certainly don't, they're new retail locations today. So here we see, is this on the common?
Yeah, that's the old train station, isn't it?
Here's Miss Wing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the train station when I was little. You remember what year they tore that down?
In the 50s.
In the 50s?
So the train station was
When
what,
Bill Poland and another man bought the building and turned it into a complex for businesses.
and that's where the art center and
Yes.
Ava
There
Cucina
was an
are
auto
now.
body shop in there for a while,
Oh.
and along came the barber shop, which is a fixture.
Mm-hmm.
There's Bettina.
Yeah, there's Mom.
You know what, I marvel at, she has so many hats in this movie.
Yeah,
First
yeah.
time we saw it, we were laughing
Jack
about
Bishop.
that.
Oh,
There's
there
the
he is.
dog. She must have had a small moving van following her around with all the hats in it.
Jim Sullivan in front of the Congregational Church.
So, what do you think about sitting on those, standing on the outside of
That's
those
Hugh
cars?
Bancroft on the left there, the fur coat.
Everett Wheelwright. Dr. Gilbert.
Oh, they even have a parade.
I love the parade down to Town Hall here.
So I think it would be wonderful if somebody could read lips, because we'd love to be able to understand what everybody is saying, or you could hear some of it. But what's amazing is to see things that you kind of look back on, like standing on the runners of the police car, and
Yeah.
just what I found fascinating in this, as the movie continued, are the retail locations of what some of the retail locations of the pharmacy, which is the empty spot beside French Memories right now, or Central Market, which is what Darylyn's is, or is it Darylyn's is now, or the A&P, or the prices of foods in the windows. I thought that was really quite fascinating. It almost makes you wonder, the before and nows of those photographs of the retail establishments, kind of gave it certainly an interesting perspective of Cohasset, with the train and the blacksmith shop, which was on the other end of town, which, I would be surprised how many people know that the blacksmith shop existed on the other side of town today. Did you see anything new and interesting that you kind of forgot about Cohasset when you were looking through that movie? Or just kind of churned up some memories?
Yes, all the faces.
Yeah.
Jim Fitzpatrick from West Corner. The other end of Cohasset is West Corner.
Yeah.
And it's still there today, and all the buildings is gone. From Nado's Barroom to Abades's and La Rosa's Barber Shop. And I went to school with one of the Fitzpatrick girls. There were 3 of them, I believe. Kathleen, and I don't know the names of the other 2. That was the other end of the town, and a lot of the people that lived over there were not even a part of this Movie Queen movie. They didn't come over to the center. As I was talking to Ralph Parencello not too long ago before he died, and he said, nope, we didn't live on this end of town. His brother said the same thing. They didn't know any of the things that were going on over here, because this was primarily in the center of Cohasset, not the outskirts. They show a little bit of Beechwood and a little bit of West Corner, but that's about it.
Yeah, Beechwood Church was there. The other aspects of recognizing people from their faces, you said it was difficult when you went through it the first time to recognize it is a movie that you need to see a few times if you have a history here to recognize faces. So you saw Mrs. Wing, who was she your third grade teacher, or?
Yeah, she was one of my teachers at the Ripley Road School.
Yeah.
She taught third grade, and she later married a man named Winship, who was an executive over at the Bethlehem Steel Company during the war, and she resided in Hingham after she left teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a friend of my mother's, who was also a school teacher at the Ripley Road School. In fact, Betty here might have even had her in school. No?
No, I didn't.
So Betty, who did you recognize after
Oh,
that?
a lot of them, but you know, there's too many to look at once.
The
So
second or
each
third
time
or
you look
fourth.
someplace else and you
Yeah.
pick up on some. I wrote a whole bunch of them on my program, and I must get it to you because picked up a lot of people that way. But
So it must be wonderful to see your mom in this movie.
oh, she was so cute.
Yeah, it really was. You know, the reason they did the movie in the first place is as a fundraiser for infantile paralysis, which we now call polio. And apparently they did this in several towns in Massachusetts. I don't know, what, 3 to 6 towns. And it appears that they didn't finish this one. It's been partially edited, but you know, it's pretty helter-skelter. And I
It just
think
comes to an end.
yeah, I think the general idea was, you know, have a really rough plot. You know, the local girl turns movie hero and comes back home, and just show the faces of all the townspeople, and then they'll pay to go see it, to see their face on the screen. You know, that's
Do you
how
remember
it seems to
seeing
be.
the movie after it was filmed? I mean, is this
No.
the first time you've seen it since?
I remember seeing it after it was filmed,
Yeah,
with all the names and faces were fresh in my memory.
yeah.
Did they have it at a theater or in the town hall or
I think
something?
they showed it in the town hall.
Really?
They
So-
didn't have auditoriums like the new one at the high school, or the auditorium at the Catholic Church. Most of those events were held at the town hall.
So,
The auditorium at the Ripley Road School was so big that it was unmanageable for anything other than town meeting.
now the Ripley Road School is
Now
the
the
present-day
library.
library. Yeah. It was interesting to see all the students coming out of down the stairs, but which is the high school, was the high school then. Which
Right,
is
the
where
Osgood School on Elm Street.
Right,
Which
which is
is
where
now
the
where the
police
police and
station-
fire station complex is, and 60 Elm Street.
was the old high school, which was called.
Torn down
Yeah.
in 1950.
And that's when you went up to.
That's correct.
If anyone is interested in seeing this movie, I understand that it's at the Historical Society. You know, if you're interested in seeing it in full length, I'm not sure if they're going to be showing it on TV station here. We should find out.
Yeah, they will be.
Good.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else you'd like to?
I think one thing is, I can remember when I was in high school here, people would know that I was Bettina's son, and they'd always just kind of get a real, Bettina kind of thing going. And I think after seeing the movie Queen, I understand that a little bit, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, she's very beautiful,
Yeah.
very beautiful, and it was
Mhm.
certainly fun to see. Just a photograph of her again.
She was a sweet lady.
And you were her babysitter, which I
Oh,
think is
wow.
really amazing.
Yeah.
That is so
Yeah.
much fun.
Yep.
Well, I thank you very much I think this is a wonderful opportunity for people in town to see that we had other than Witches of Eastwick and House Sitter or whatever, we had initially Movie Queen, which I think is really quite fun. Add this to our roster of Hollywood movies, or at least movies that we
Yeah.
can put on our list. Well, I thank you very much for coming to listen to the story about the movie Queen and visiting with Bill Liscombe and Betty Marie and John Kennedy. And thank you very, very much for coming here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
George Bowser.